Hello, welcome to Artman, and this is part 3 of working on this drawing and making a color pencil drawing look like an oil painting. Okay, so in the last video I added the background here and really blended it into the face. So in this part of the video we're really going to work on the darks and get those shadows in. And what that's going to do, it's really going to bring out the neon, because now that the colors are all there, we just have to work on creating that really dramatic contrast. And that's what really makes something have that neon glow. It's not so much about the bright neon color, it's more about the colors that surround it and how dark they are versus how light the neon is. But first what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna speed this up, I'm just gonna cover all the white of the paper, because if you don't do that as you're working, this white is gonna throw off the contrast. And I go in different directions, I don't really care, it's fine. Because if you go in different directions, then you can really cover the grain of the paper much better. And at the edges, that's usually just how I leave an edge. I leave it looking like colored pencil. And I find leaving an edge like that, kind of raw, it's great because you get to see that kind of magic of nothingness of the paper and then layers and layers and then wow, realistic image. But it's also great if you're framing the work, because when you sell this painting, the client can have the matte come in and this gives it a nice blended edge. Whereas if you keep that really harsh taped edge, you're gonna have to get a matte to fit that exactly. So that's another reason why I leave a faded edge like that. And to me it's about the figure, it's not so much about the background. And what's so beautiful about oil paintings, it's that crisp reality of the focus point coming through and then everything else blending into the background, which is how our eyes actually see. Our eyes focus in like a lens on whatever subject we're looking at, and then everything else is in the peripheral vision. So use that natural way of seeing when you're looking at the background. Let the background blend into the figure in the areas that are not the focal point. So that's why I'm using this pencil and I'm kind of going over the edge of the figure, because at the edges here the figure doesn't need to be that crisp. Okay, now I'm gonna go in with a harder pressure and really polish up that background. And because we've already layered so many colors, those colors are gonna blend in as you're using your brightest neon light. It's gonna blend in and create a very nice rich color atmosphere. And really make sure to blend that figure into the background, especially where the hair is. Look at this beautiful effect, how the figure's hair just disappears into the atmosphere. And this is what we're looking for, because this is using color pencil like you would use oil. With oil, you're looking to create an atmosphere, a lifelike figure. Because if your drawing or painting has too many harsh, crisp lines, that's the look of an illustration. Because when you're looking at a lifelike image, colors reflect on each other, surfaces blend into each other. So you can get that look by taking your lightest color and really blending it into the figure. You want to polish out any of these little grains of the paper. And this is another reason why I really blend the figure into the background, because that's what happens when you use oil paint. It's harder to create these harsh, crisp lines with oil paint. And it's also those harsh lines that make a painting look like an illustration. What you want to focus on is making a lifelike image where colors reflect on surfaces, where surfaces blend into each other. And you can get that by taking your bright neon color and really taking it over the figure and over those crisp lines. And also look at your drawing and think of how can I break up these large areas of color. For example, in my reference photo, the light is coming from here. So here it's really blue, but as the light fades and gets pink reflected on it, it becomes more of a purple color. And now let's use a color that's a little bit paler than our bright pink to really work over those highlights and really blend everything. And it's at this point when I'm really working on smoothing out the background that I apply most pressure on it, because you really want to get into all the little crevices of the paper. And also when you're pressing down, you're using your color pencil as a blender, so you're blending all those colors together. And you're also building up the wax so that your drawing will start to get that kind of shiny oil painting like finish. It's gonna increase the saturation of your color. And you don't have to get every single one of the little dots of the paper peeking through, you can use solvent and layer over it again to really blend them in. And again, blend in those harsh areas. And I usually use a brush to dust off all the color pencil dust. I don't use it with my hand because then you're gonna blend and blend the dust together. So always use a brush to dust off. And this is the only area where I really keep that edge crisp because this is where the light's coming through. So here I focus on preserving that edge because it's closest to the light source. And here, doesn't matter, just go over it. Okay, so now that the background is blended in, we can really start working on the darks closer to the light source. And again, like I said, if you have a blue light source, you're gonna have a blue highlight where the light is hitting the object, and then you're gonna have a blue shadow. So you're not just going to have the reflective light immediately. So the closest shadow to the light source when making neon drawings is going to be the same color as the light. So I'm going to go in with the blue. And notice how I already laid down a basic shadow color. I'm just gonna go over that and tint. And when drawing fabric, really think of them as little mountains and little hills. So you have a light source coming in from this side, that's gonna reflect on one side of the hill. Then you have the highlight coming in from this side, color light, so it's gonna reflect on this side of the hill. So try to really visualize folds on fabric in an abstract way, like little volumes and little mountains and valleys. And try to connect the shadows so that they're not just floating. Like if I just put in a fold of the fabric here, that's like a floating shadow, it's not connected to anything. So think of shadows as drawing lines going around the figure. So a shadow is always connected. It's never a floating solitary object unless it's going around the form. And even then, it's never really floating. It's connecting into the highlight color. Think of volumes like arms or the chest in a cylindrical form. So your drawing follows around the contour of the shape, but the shadow also will go down the cylinder of the shape. And at this point, this is where you want to get your pencils really, really sharp because we're going to start going into those darks and making them really crisp. And as I'm working on the blue shadows, I'm not using any purple. I'm only using dark blues because we're going after that chromatic saturated blue light. So limit your palette to only blues. And look at how adding those darks in the shadows will really make the light look so much more dramatic. Anytime there is a highlight anywhere, like here it's a blue highlight, you're gonna have a blue shadow right next to it. And then you're gonna go into the reflective light. I'm connecting the shadows. And look at how drawing those folds and really following through on the drawing of the fold into the highlight with that blue color. Look at how much dimension that creates, but we're still keeping that saturated color all the way into even the highlighted area. Okay, so now let's go in with the darkest blue color that we have and add it only into the darkest parts of your drawing, especially where clothes end, where clothes start, where objects are overlapping. That's where you want to keep the darkest color. So now let's do the same but on the pink purple side. So we're going to take the darkest color and really follow around the shapes of those darks. And you see how we built up the drawing so you can still see the lines underneath to add that hair later. And that'll be the final details, is adding that hair, but you still keep that drawing underneath from layering those darker colors. And remember that the brightest color that we have is the synthetic neon blue. So even the most highlighted area in the pink range of the drawing is still going to be quite dark. And that's how you really get that crisp light on the edge, is by taking down the rest of the drawing. And you can go back in between the colors. You see a part of the shadow that's blue, then you layer that in. So at this point you're going to be working with several colors at once. You can go over those highlights and really polish them. Now that you have those darks, dark blues underneath, you can just blend right over. So at this point you can start to define some of that hair using a sharper pencil. Don't go too crazy with the hair. Hair is something that's usually kind of messy, so remember to keep the drawing really loose. as you are defining the hair. Basically just trace whatever drawing you left when you were first filling in everything. Okay, now we're gonna go in. Okay, and at this stage, you wanna start layering up and really polishing the pink side of the drawing. Notice how folds of the fabric, as they come into the pink part of the painting, will turn from blue to pink. And now take a medium light blue color and really blend over any of those transitions that you have. I darkened the shirt a little bit because the part that's closest to the light is the face. I'm really searching for those color zones in the face. Okay, so it's getting kind of dark and I'm starting to lose the natural light. So what I'm going to do is blend out the rest of the background, polish it so that no white shows through, and we'll do one more session just darkening up all the shadows and then the drawing will be done.